Hello, everyone. Wow, what a nice big turnout. This is lovely on a rainy day. Thank you so much for being here. So, welcome. Friendly reminder to turn off your cell phones. And we want to just give a big thank you to Bibliophile Bookstore. They're just setting up. You should come and buy books afterwards, please. And a thank you to our partners, the Côte-Saint-Luc Women's Social Club. Thank you, lovely ladies. So this event is in the context of Holocaust Education Week. It is an annual event that offers Holocaust education programming across Canada. Throughout the month of November, engage with Holocaust history through events that offer powerful learning opportunities. Our celebrated author today is Donna Nebenzahl with her new memoir, To Linger with You, a memoir of sunshine and longing. Donna grew up in the 1950s, part of a close-knit Portuguese family in the South American colony of British Guiana. I keep mispronouncing it. Nurtured by loving grandparents, she spent her childhood never asking why her mother lived a continent away or the reason for her father's early death. Nor did she know why, having been brought up Catholic, she had a Jewish last name. As the colony gained independence and she moved to Canada, Nebenzahl began to explore the difficult issues that her family history raised. The answers emerge gradually in this luminous, compelling memoir that explores the aftermath of loss and the true meaning of home. Our interviewer today is Elaine Kalman Naves. She is a Montreal writer, journalist, editor, and lecturer. She was born in Hungary and grew up in Budapest, London, and Montreal. For many years, she was literary columnist for the Montreal Gazette and is the author of 8 books, including 2 of her own award-winning memoirs. So please give them a great big round of applause. Come on up, ladies.
Hello, everyone. Is this working fine? Oh. Okay, well, just no, it's fine. As long as you can hear me. Okay. Yeah. A little bit closer, wait. Yeah. Maybe it needs to be lowered. Can you? I don't know how to do that lowering stuff. No.
Okay. I've got a nice thing. So, it's really, really nice to be here, and it's really nice to be out, and it's very big thing during a bus ride and the rainy day. And, it's really, I think you find that it's worth your while on the daughter, and, I really like this slide. There are so many places where we could start our conversation, Donna, about your book. You were a child seemingly privileged, but also you were an orphan. Your father had died tragically when you were a baby. You were only 25. And your mother was absent for many of your first 10 years. You were a happy child in a Caribbean paradise. This is described so evocatively in this passage. But also, subsequent, you became an immigrant child in a frozen country here in Montreal. So very, very different from your homeland. And later on, as an adult, you became a sleuth uncovering Catholic history that turned up a completely unexpected tragedy. Why this event is still under the rubric of Holocaust education. All of this and much more we will try to explore in a few minutes. Again, I think I would like to read the back cover of your book, which was just read it a minute ago, but I'd like to go more slowly. Donna Nebenzahl grew up in the 1950s, part of a close-knit Portuguese family in the South American colony of British Guiana. Nurtured by loving grandparents, she spent her childhood never asking why her mother lived a continent away. Or the reason for her father's early death. Nor did she know why, having been brought up Catholic, she had a Jewish last name. As Guyana gained independence in the mid-1960s and she moved to Canada, Donna began to explore the difficult issues that her family history raised. The answers emerged gradually in the luminous, compelling memoir that explores the aftermath of loss and the true meaning of home. So there's this wonderful title, To Linger With You. I'd like to start with that. That's a line from an old Platter song. Some of you may remember it from My Prayer. Okay, the full line is, my prayer is to linger with you at the end of the day.
In a dream that's divine.
Can you tell us why you chose it?
Sure. Well, it was a very particular moment in my growing up. My several of my aunts. So I grew up in a very big Portuguese family. There were 10 siblings. My grandparents were the two who took care of us, my brother and I. And during the holidays, we would be sent out to what used to be the sugarcane plantations that originally had been worked in by the slaves who the British had brought to that country, as they did to so many. And when slavery ended, this is where my Portuguese ancestors, this is how they came to end up in South America. They were brought as indentured labor. Over 30,000 Portuguese came from Madeira. And into that mix, at that point, there was a Black population. The Portuguese, there was a small Chinese population, and many indentured laborers who had come from India. So we had a very interesting, and of course the British were still there, but they no longer had slaves. And so the Portuguese went to work in the plantations and ended up, I'm sorry, maybe I'm giving too much story.
No,
I have this problem, I just.
Ended up in a place called Wales, which wasn't.
Right, so Wales was the name they gave to one of these, I don't like to call them plantations. I mean, that's so heavily weighted with slavery, but it was a sugarcane estate. And several of my aunts had married British men who had come over there to work. So we would go in the summer, and it was this beautiful spot where on one side was the Demerara River, kind of over this ridge. And on the other side was a long canal. And the boats, the punts, they called them, would carry mounds of sugarcane to the factories, and they'd cook it. And so there'd be this amazing smell of burnt sugar, because the Demerara River, I don't know if you're familiar with Demerara sugar or Demerara rum, that's where it comes from. So my cousins and my brother and I would go there to play basically during our summer holidays, because my grandparents didn't want us to stay in the big city of Georgetown. So, and one night, this is my memory, these houses were cut, there were windows on all sides, and the casement windows opened out onto the river. It was dark. You could kind of feel that river. It was a very kind of slow moving river. And the Platters was playing on the radio, and that song was playing, and I never forgot it. I mean, I learned the words to many Platters songs. That was just one of them. But when it came time to write this book, because I believe that the story is really about sitting with memory, lingering with my memories of growing up in South America, And also, my father who died when I was just a baby. So I am trying to linger here with my story, with the story of my childhood.
So that's a wonderful, eloquent answer, which gives you a sense of what this book is about, what it's going to read like. And so let's go next to that wonderful subtitle, which is a memoir of sunshine and longing. So I'd like to start with the sunshine part of your memoir.
Yes.
And there's a lovely reading, pages 19, begins on page 19. So my memory begins.
Oh, yes. So my memories begin here in the company of cousins and aunts and uncles and my little brother under the quietly fierce protection of my Portuguese grandparents, who by virtue of grandfather's determination and hard work had clambered into the moneyed segment of society. In that big house, we children were shielded from poverty and from the injustices of life in this country, the colony of British Guiana, known to us as BG. For years, I had no sense of the tragedy that accompanied my own beginning, nor that I was living through the difficult birth pangs of a country already tainted with the terrible usage of human beings, about to move from colonialism to a fractured new identity. And what about our identity, we Portuguese, who generations earlier had struggled across the ocean from Madeira, desperate to avoid starvation? We tried to fit in with the powerful. Granny and grandfather had given their children names more suitable for the colonizers. My aunts were Olga, Thelma, and Lucille, my mother, Gwendoline. As we navigated the borders of European gentility, gone were the names given to an earlier generation, Francisco, Jose, Leolinda. Was our grandparents' inherited pragmatism the reason behind this? Maybe, although by the time I was growing up, our Portuguese stories and familial connections had combined with our British cultural routines to create a hybrid character. We were Guyanese at home in the tropics. In my child's eye, the sun shone on Georgetown in the 1950s, a city of big wooden buildings, often painted white or pale yellow with many windows. I recall the long avenues, their grass-covered medians cooled by the wide canopies of century-old plane trees, the exciting darkness of the tiny shops where we might stop to buy a bottle of lemonade, the sing-song West Indian cadence of the chatty street vendor, the melodies of calypso and boisterous rhythms of the steel band. Because British Guiana was an outlier, while the country's tongue was English, Guyana is the only English-speaking country in South America, and its body part of the South American continent, its face turned toward the Caribbean.
So you grew up in a beautiful home and went to private school, but the most salient reason that you were a happy child, because you really seemed the picture of a happy childhood, was your close relationship with your grandparents. And I mean, they were remarkable people. They took up the responsibility for two little kids after they finished raising and their own, in one part, they had been my grandparents now. So maybe you're not finished bringing up your children even then, but so these, I know you want to think, I know you want to read about your background, but you have to give us a sense of living in that house on Big Down Road, right? That road
Street, yeah.
That house actually, you're going to read a section about the town, but this house actually had a house.
Yeah, well, the area we lived in, it was full of big houses, and my grandparents' house, 46 Brick Dam, they were all the houses, I mean, if you've been to the tropics, you'll see that they tend to be sort of encircled. They've got fences or gates, and my grandparents' house, and you can actually, the front of the book shows you the paling, we called it, the fencing, and then the big wrought iron gates. And it was a 3-story house because that first story in South America, in the tropics, there was monsoons, you'd have heavy rains. And so the living kind of only started one floor up. And because it was so full of life, because I did have, and not that many aunts and uncles, but I had 2 aunts that I grew up with and a few uncles. They were slowly making their way to Canada. And, but many cousins, because my grandfathers owned like the 3 houses from one street to another. And in the middle house was my cousins lived in, and there was 5 of them. So the house was full of children. It was full of excitement. And I guess I write about it a lot at the beginning of the book, because it never left. It looked after me. I call it the sentinel of my childhood. You know, I saw it, I lived there, I wandered around the garden. I got ferried to and from school, and I could see the house. You know, it was a beautiful place. And in my memory that it's over there. Okay. I have always been able to walk through that house. I could tell you what was on the counter. I could tell you what the texture was of the windows, or what the feeling was of my grandmother's table. It just stayed with me.
It's quite amazing, and we get that across. Would you like to read pages 43? Start reading pages 43.
Yes, my grandparents, okay. My grandparents' bedroom at the front of the house opened onto the tower, with windows on 3 sides. In one corner near the entry, a small high shelf held a statue of the infant Jesus of Prague, wearing a golden crown, red cloak, and high collar, and holding an orb. But I never went there to pray. I went to spend time with the people who sat in the 2 big rocking chairs that dominated that room. Every night, grandfather would sit in his rocker alongside the open casement windows at the front of the room, and Granny in hers beside the other windows facing him. This was their routine. He in his striped pajamas, she in her nightie and dressing gown, every night before bed, rocking and talking quietly, or just sitting with their rosaries and their thoughts. In one corner stood an upright Singer sewing machine, folded into its wooden shell, and piled on top, a few small pillows, zippered and tightly trimmed. Stuffed in those pillows, we were told, was Granny's long auburn hair that she cut off when she became a mother. Before I went to bed, I would climb onto Granny's lap as she rocked slowly in the night, inhaling the sweet fragrance of the Nivea cream that she would rub on her hands, smoothing it gently on her fine, mottled skin. She had small hands with strong, blunt fingers and short nails, no-nonsense hands. I would sometimes trace the veins under her soft skin and feel the bumps around the knuckles thickened with arthritis. She would massage her fingers occasionally, but her knees hurt the most. She was not yet 60 and quite round, and would often sit and rub her swollen knees in a circular motion, complaining quietly.
Thank you. That's beautiful. So, there's this real sense of the sensuous and the senses and everything that you like. And we were speaking about being able to somehow do memories with like that and restore them up. One of the memories, one of the senses is and what you do with food in your book is amazing. There are these mouth-watering recipes, exotic ingredients that came together. It's one of these incredible combinations. I think we all understand somehow the language of food. We can relate, to connect to tradition, to culture, and maybe even history, using food. And I think you do that really well here. Can you talk a little bit about what you try to do and what came together for you as you were writing the section about eating meals?
Well, I don't know what it says about me that it's something that really stuck with me. I mean, I think people do that. You remember some delicious dish you had when you were a child, or, you know, the smell of something coming from the kitchen when you were walking by, or those are things that it anchors us to our childhood. And I guess in my case, because, you know, we'll talk about this probably later, but coming from South America, from that kind of garden to Canada was a bit wrenching. And so I think I went back to those places quite a lot as I grew up.
In your mind.
In my mind.
In your mind. you
Yes,
never went back.
no, I never
You
went back.
went
No,
back.
that's right. So, I kind of, there were things that they were so unforgettable, you know, the foods, and that you can't recreate here. You know, I tried. And you really can, you can do some of it, and we do have our traditions, our Christmas tradition, and things like that we still do. And I still make Christmas cakes that come from the early Portugal. Anyway, so that's another story. But
Because some of the things that, you know, the ingredients out of which some of these delicious foods came were actually awful. I mean, OFFAL.
True. Yeah, so it is true that we used to have these stews, and oh, they were so delicious, but they were things like pig's feet and well, oxtail, which is considered kind of chic right now, but those were always the kind of leftovers. And I never did stop to think. I never knew what a steak was or a roast was. We did eat meat, but we always seemed to have the bits that I'm wondering whether the British, who kind of were in charge of the whole thing, were they eating the steaks while we were eating, you know, the pork hocks and all of those things that you had to cook forever in order to make them tender, which of course made them spectacular. But it was just, and I guess because we ate food from that area, we ate the kinds of dishes. There was a famous one called pepper pot, which is made from the root of the cassava plant. And it's a very dark syrup. It looks like molasses. And you have to cook this stuff forever. And it is so spectacularly delicious that, you know, we would eat it. Sometimes we'd have it for breakfast, and it was like, it couldn't be, I can't describe it. And to be honest, that's one of the dishes I tried to make here in Canada, and I couldn't pull it off.
Exactly those kinds of ingredients.
I think not. You know, I mean, probably more now than before, because you can buy them in like West Indian grocery stores, but I never did manage it.
So, maybe page 7, a little bit starting, a little reading there, about sitting down.
Oh, yes. Okay, good. Okay, we gathered every day for lunch, including grandfather, who would sit with us over a leisurely meal, then rest before returning in mid-afternoon to Betancourt's, the big department store that he managed. We always celebrated when Cookie, that was the name of our cook. So remember that my grandparents, although we were not the colonizers, they were relatively wealthy, and we had a cook and a gardener, and we had maids, but Cookie she was it for me. Cookie made metamji, another childhood delight, a concoction of root vegetables cooked in a broth of coconut milk. I would slather the thick coconut sauce over the yams, eddos, and plantain and mash them all together, savoring the fragrant, earthy flavor. Other times, Cookie would make chow mein, a West Indian variety without bean sprouts. She brought it to the table on a platter, a huge mound of flat egg noodles loaded with vegetables and sliced hard-boiled eggs. I enjoyed black pudding, a fat sausage filled with rice mixed with black congealed blood and many spices, served, sliced, and best eaten without thinking too hard about its contents. And I looked forward to delectable salt fish, another stew, this one with shreds of long soaked salt cod, soft rounds of onion, and slices of hard-boiled egg in a buttery broth. Sometimes at lunch, Cookie would bring a jug of lemonade to the table, or my favorite, sorrel, a clear red drink with an unforgettable herbal sweetness made by soaking sorrel, a tropical hibiscus flower, in water with ginger, orange peel, and cinnamon sticks. It would then be strained and sweetened and served in an ice-filled glass. Granny, on the other hand, always favored more healthy foods, except for special occasions when she would make ice cream in a large metal churn. We loved to watch as the interior well, surrounded by tightly packed ice and rock salt, filled up with thick milk and vanilla. Then the lid would be screwed on, and Granny, with a little help from us children, would turn the crank until she deemed the ice cream ready. No ice cream is ever compared to the creamy, vanilla-studded mixture we ate in little white bowls.
Yeah. I think it's time to start talking about the other side. It is the Memoir of Sunshine Long. So I think part of the meaning of long is that not recalling that. Can you talk first of all about why your family came to Montreal, because they have lost involved, personal loss involved.
Right. Well, I think that slowly, because of what was going on there in South America, I mean, the British were giving up the colony. There was a lot of negotiation and discussion about it becoming an independent country, which is, you know, the end product of colonialism, inevitably. And it was a bit of a mess. It was a bit scary. And so my family, because the Portuguese were really they were not a large group in that country, slowly people began to leave. They went to England or they went to Canada. And my mother's brothers and sisters started to come here. And then slowly, and of course, the missing piece here is also that after my father died, my mother, I was born in Trinidad, Port of Spain, Trinidad, because my parents had lived there, had moved there, a young couple, incredibly happy, fantastically beautiful and in love. And when I was 4 months old, my father died. And so it was a tragedy. My mother came back to Georgetown, to Guyana, British Guiana. And then by the time I was 3, she had come to Canada as well. We had a supportive family. We weren't abandoned in that sense. We had lots of family around us taking care of us. And her choice was to try to get on with her life. I say that retrospectively. At the time, I really didn't know why this had happened. And I actually never questioned why it had happened. We knew we had a mother. She lived in Canada. We knew our father had died. And we were happy. We were okay. We didn't miss anything because we didn't know what to miss, if you know what I mean. So I forgot the question.
The question was, you know, your family, you know, at a certain point, you know, you had to make the move.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And
yeah.
You didn't, I don't think at the time that you can question that.
No.
You just had to be.
Yep. So
And you
we
came by yourself on
well,
a big ship.
well, my grandparents came with us.
But
Yeah.
they-
Oh, yeah. They came back. Yeah. So we had done it once before. We took the Saguenay steamships. So these were freighters because there was no such thing as a cruise ship going to Georgetown. And so we came once when I was about 6 years old, which was fantastically wonderful because we stopped in all these islands up the coast, and we took on bauxite in Trinidad. I remember that. It was the only time I ever saw Trinidad. And once we brought cows. I think we brought them from Canada back to South America. But that was very exciting for a couple of 6 and 8-year-olds or whatever age we were to be on a ship with cows. So we had a good time doing that. And then finally we came to Canada, and it was, I think the only clue I really remember was that my grandmother had a little red coat made for me, because all our dresses were made from the seamstress made our clothes. And so I had a little coat so that I would be warm in Canada, which of course did not work out at all. Yeah. It wasn't, but, and you know, a little red coat doesn't quite do it. But it was, I think it was, well, I write in the book about, I had my first headache, my first big headache. I was 10 years old, and people came to say goodbye to us, like, so it became real. I don't recall ever like contemplating it, or how is this going to feel, or am I scared, or am I nervous? I think children just do what is happening. You do kind of what the Buddhists say, which is live in the present moment. And so it was, so we came to Canada, and it was a it was different. It was as different as it could be. I never had even experienced cold. I didn't know what it felt like to be in a cold atmosphere. So, and I came to with what it felt like to be cold. Yes, well, I mean, I went to school. We lived in NDG, Upper Lachine Road. I don't know if any of you remember Seal Test Dairy with the 2 cows. Well, we lived in a little apartment. Well, it wasn't that little. I thought, how do you get a whole house into this? 3 bedrooms it had, a living room. It had a kitchen. It was amazing. And right across the street it was a time when Elmhurst Dairy, you could go there and get ice cream. It was so wonderful. Pistachio ice cream I had never seen in my life. And then of course, and I used to walk to school up over the tracks to St. Ignatius. I don't know if any of you know where that is, but anyway, so there I was trudging along, knee socks, blue knees, because it was getting colder. And there was a moment when, of course, what child does not do this? The apartment door had a metal band that went across, so that you pushed. And I decided, yes, I decided, you know, what kid hasn't done that? Anyway, I recovered. My tongue stayed intact. I think I breathed so heavily on it that I loosened it. But there were many amazing things. I went into a classroom with a West Indian accent. I mean, it was interesting. I looked like everybody else. I mean, I might have been a little browner, you know, because you don't go out to get tanned when you live in South America. You just kind of tan naturally. But I had this accent. And so that kind of separated me. And I guess later on, the idea of what it feels like to be an immigrant, to be that kid in the classroom, the only one very often who had come from another country. It was very interesting, and maybe, maybe because I kind of think of myself as an observer of life, of what's going on around me. I think maybe I really, apart from the fact that I was always in my books, I always lived close up. That's how I describe myself. You know, I lived in books. I lived close to everything. Anyway, I guess I looked a lot at what was going on around me. So maybe that's why I ended up being a journalist.
So at a certain point in your, you know, in your evolution, you know, from child to adolescent adult, you began to think about it.
Yes.
Can you feel very nice on a particular moment?
About, well, yes. I mean, I think as an adolescent, you know, the story lurks in the background all the time of what's your life story? What's your history? We all know our history, but maybe in this case, the idea of him And I think as I was getting older, of course, you know, I was getting closer to his age. And I kind of had this moment, this shock, when I was telling somebody the story, one of my teenage friends, of, you know, yeah, my father died when I was a baby, and he had this ulcer that hemorrhaged and he died. And it suddenly hit me that he was gone. I lost him. I lost my father. A young man, he was 25. Shocking to think, isn't it? And I guess the humanity, the person, not the photograph or not the story, the actual reality of it. I started to think more about him, think more about who he was or what kind of life he had. Hence longing, you know. Yes.
And the gradual emergence of the idea that the father
Mm,
after.
mm.
It could hardly have been a welcome thought to someone. They have it. What made you realize that you have some?
Well, it was a kind of, for a long time, it was a name that nobody could figure it out. You know, people told me, oh, Nebenzahl, it means, it's German. It means the nearby number or the nearby room or something. And it wasn't really until I had kids. And you know how you used to put the little blurb in the newspaper? You know, Nebenzahl, Donna. Birth announcements, right? Not blurb. Birth announcements. And every time I would get a phone call from somebody who would say, you know, Nebenzahl, you're my family. I have family named Nebenzahl. They came from Eastern Europe. You know, are you connected to them? And I would always say, no, of course not. How could I be? I'm South American. I'm Portuguese. And I figured it must have been maybe a branch of Nebenzahl that had gone to South America somehow. And so for a long time, you know, having kids takes up a fair bit of one's life for, you know, a decade or two. So I didn't think much about it. And then I had time. So it sort of began with, through a man named Stanley Diamond that some of you may know or know of. He put me in touch with someone who was a researcher, a woman named Jackie Schwartz, who lives in Antwerp. And I still wasn't writing a book. I was just looking. And Jackie started to do research. And at the same time, around the same time that this had happened, I was doing a kind of crappy job researching Nebenzahl. I couldn't find any names or any connections. And then one day, I don't exactly remember how, but there was the name Joseph Nebenzahl on the Shoah Memorial in Paris. And that was where Jackie went for me to look to find out whether this man, Joseph Nebenzahl, was actually my grandfather. And we concluded, well, there's lots of bits and pieces to the story. Finally, after this, I mean, it was a huge thing to imagine that this man, who I never thought of, I never thought of him. I thought of my father, and I tried to think about who my father was, but I really didn't go back any further than that. And then there he was.
It's understanding the property. And by that time, we put together enough of your father's history to know that, you know, he grew up fairly abandoned, not a passion, not at all in the way that we were left. And he didn't really impact in this.
So that, yeah, so the story gets kind of, you might say, weirder, because my father, the one who married my mother in Trinidad, and, you know, in fact, was born in Monte Carlo and grew up, he was a child in Paris. So the story starts to go off in a whole other direction. And it turns out that Nebenzahl, Joseph, had come to South America, had met this willful, beautiful teenager named Wild Girl. Yes. She married at least 4 times. We're trying to figure out if there was one more, but I'm not sure about that one. Anyway, so they had gone off to Europe together. They left South America, had gone off to Europe. My father was born. They spent time in Paris. They came back with one child and she was having another. So then they spent another, I would say another 4 years in South America, in Georgetown. And this time, kind of mimicking what my mother did, or she was mimicking what they did, they went away back to Europe and left my brother, my father, and his sister with her parents. So, but my father had spent, you know, basically 8 years with a father. And when they left, and he never came back. So when she came back finally a few years later, and we're getting into wartime here. We're getting into Joseph being in Paris at the beginning of the war. And she's come back, and my father, and this, I only realized this when I was writing this book, effectively never saw his own father again. But as I kind of say in here, but he knew, I didn't know what I was missing. I never had a father, but he did. And he never came back. So there was, as Elaine talks about, like a kind of relationship that like a mirror relationship that we've had, him and I. Yes. Yes. Well, that's a great and one interesting mystery. I don't know that.
So, you can see that there's so much, and it's so rich. It's not a long book, but it's such a rich book. I had all kinds of other questions
Yeah.
that I want to ask you, but I do want to open it up.
Yes,
to,
yes, yes.
to the audience. If you have any questions, it would be great if you share them. Okay, there's a question back there, yeah. Yes. When you came to Canada, did you rejoin your mother at that?
Oh, yes, yes, definitely. Yes, we did. My brother and I. Yes, and that there is a whole other adventure that happens there too, because we came to Canada. We were living in this apartment, which I thought was so fantastic. And then my mother told us that she was getting married again. So I had a stepfather, and that was not good. I mean, it was good. It was good. But I mean, he was a good guy, but I mean, I was a reader. I knew what happened to Cinderella. I knew that if you were a stepdaughter, that was it. You were behind the stove wearing rags. So absolutely, it was not the reaction I think my mother wanted when she broke the news. Was her daughter, her little daughter, bursting into tears. It was, but yes, but it worked out fine. Well, you know, it's good that you asked that question. So, you know, my father was 25 when he died. My mother was alone for, I want to say 11 years. My stepfather was 25 when she married him. Isn't that interesting? Now, of course, they had to keep their, this difference in age. We never knew. Actually, we literally never knew. I knew that he was younger than her, but it was, I think they felt that they had to protect this. And I don't know whether she ever really, I never asked her, did you realize that Bill was only 25 when you married him? because it was almost like, okay, so that there was that big chasm and now we'll start again.
You can start another one.
That's right. And it was,
She was 25 when she did your dad.
yes, yes.
And it's really quite fascinating how there are these patterns.
Yes, that's true.
Well, yes,
Oops.
there are two, okay. Yeah, it's Rachel, right? Okay, Rachel first, okay.
Of course. It's a very common name. The Freitas.
The Freitas.
Yes. Yes, yes, that's right. Oh, well, we'll talk about that later, maybe. I'm not sure. You need to ask my Auntie Olga. Mhm. Oh, great question. Well, I mean, I think I feel like a door has opened for me that I actually I didn't realize was there and then was closed, but I think it's opened. And I'm hoping to do some more research. I'm hoping to try to see the sort of trajectory of that family. I know that according to the research that Jackie did, they came from Poland. And oh well, this is a real aside, but my husband used to always joke that sometimes I didn't like to sleep on lumpy beds or something. You remember the story, The Princess and the Pea? Okay, so he used to call me a Polish princess. And now I say, oh, well, as it turns out, I am a Polish princess. But yes, I think that I want to follow that story. I would like to understand that story. They went to Belgium, they became naturalized Belgians. And then after that is when he was Joseph, as a young man, then for some reason went to South America. So that's how that part of it. And Ina was already there. My grandmother was already growing up there. So the story just sort of, what amazes me in all of this is how you think, oh my God, this stuff started happening in, the late 1800s, the early 1900s. People moved around. We think that, oh, how could they have, like we're the ones who get on planes to go here and there, but there was a lot of migration. It's quite fascinating. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
How did I know it? Well, I didn't know it. I mean, I think there's enough. Well, the researcher in Antwerp did a lot of work. She actually found the sort of original kind of birth records of the family of Nebenzahl, in which my grandfather was the son. And that was one of the clues as well, because my father's name, because we didn't have 100%. Jackie said it's 99% that this is him. And as you'll see in the book, I decided it's him. I decided he is my grandfather. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yes. But there were other things too, because Joseph's father's name was Paul, and my father's name when he was baptized was George Louis Paul Nebenzahl, and Joseph's middle name was George. So, what she said to me was that people do, you often see this, right? You name your child, you give the middle name of your grandfather or things like that. So, and also I did discover that there are many people with the last name of Nebenzahl in Israel. So I guess that's all why. Those are reasons why. Now, interestingly, Susan Schwartz, who did a fabulous story about the book in the Gazette this past week on Saturday. She told me that there was a very well-known family in Montreal, a Jewish family named Hart. Their last name was Hart. Well, my grandmother's last name was Hart. My South American, my father's mother. So was there a connection? Did my other grandmother? No, not my Portuguese grandmother, not my round Portuguese grandmother. So was it possible that that my father, Joseph, who was Jewish, met somebody in South America named Hart, who he knew was Jewish? That is yet to be discovered.
I believe that Donna is thinking of writing a novel about the other grandparents.
Yes.
The Nebenzahl
Yes.
grandparents.
Yes.
We have to look forward to that.
Yes.
I would like to make sure that there's time for a book signing, because Sandy is there, over there, Bibliophile Sandy, at the books. And I want to thank you very much, Donna, for being so generous.
My great pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.